It's a struggle to understand how I'm no longer 20. I don't know anybody else this has ever happened to. Most people, they get to 20, and then they stay 20. It didn't happen for me, though. I just went on and on and on, and suddenly I'm 56. So I have to write from this unique perspective of somebody who never stopped being 20. But I went on. Isn't that weird? The sin of the artist, when you have an idea and then you fuck it up. And Francis Bacon used to do it all the time, so I'm in good company. Where you think you've got to a point where it's really good, and then you do that next thing, and it's the worst possible thing you could have done, and you've just gone overboard, and you think, sod, I've ruined it. There's no going back, you know, because
I've always found that I collect. I'm a collector. And I've always just seemed to collect personalities, ideas. I have a hodgepodge philosophy, which really is very minimal. Very
Do you
little
believe in
of it
God,
is
for instance?
What?
Do you believe in God?
I believe in an energy form, but I'm not. I wouldn't I wouldn't like to put a name to it.
Do you indulge in any form of worship?
Life. I love life very much indeed.
I think it's terribly dangerous for an artist to fulfill other people's expectations. I think they generally produce their worst work when they do that. And the other thing I would say is that if you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting.
In both Low and Heroes, you create moods that are thought paintings that don't really require words or can get along with a mock language and not even a real tongue to get the idea across.
Yeah.
Is that what's coming? Is that what's up now?
Well, what happened is that I didn't have the necessary verbal equipment to describe what I was seeing, and that's where I needed assistance.
Mm-hmm.
I needed somebody to bounce ideas off and somebody to give me input, because
Right.
I was so confused with all these blessed people running around my head that I had to do that. So, and Eno was somebody that I'd known for years and years and never had the chance to work with.
Brian Eno, formerly of Roxy Music, for any of you people who don't know. I'm sorry.
And formerly of the Portsmouth Symphonia.
Portsmouth Symphonia.
And many lectures.
Many lectures, all that. He's a professor of fine arts. Right. And you got involved with him. And he had been making electronic music for, you know.
I wouldn't like to just call it electronic music. He'd been making his own very personal music because he also used organic instruments as well, apart from electronics.
Mm-hmm. Even Heroes, where side one is so accessible that it's the finest, I think in our opinion, what you've done up to date as far as bridging that, accessibility towards that, as you would say, personal music,
Yeah, there was a lot of enthusiasm on Heroes because Brian and I liked so much what we did on Low, and we knew we had it in us to do another one, and now I think even a third one. I honestly can't say there's been one person or one set of values or one artistic movement. I think all my life, I've been so eclectic all my life. I've been admiring of so many different people and so many different things that they've done that it almost feel that I feel that I owe so many, people for the way that I think and do things. I guess anybody who's had the integrity to kind of always work outside of the system has always appealed to me. I think my material, it's hardening up a bit recently, but my material has often been so surrealistic in format that it gives a general impression of how I see things. I think more politically demanding music of the Lennons and the Dylans and the Clash are more successful in riveting people and focusing people's attention on events. I think mine is more of a general ambience of what's happening. I don't think yeah. I think that's how I think about my stuff.
I think that a lot of adults want you to take seriously the responsibility, the apparent responsibility you have to kids who identify, and I don't think that there are very many musicians other than you with whom people identify so strongly, obsessively, and often self-destructively. Do you feel a responsibility at all? How closely?
I would question that. I don't know. I've always written strictly for myself, what pleases me and what I want to write. You know, I got a pretty good library at home, and if my son is in the library and I'm not there and he pulls out a book that I'd rather he didn't, he's going to read it anyway. I mean, one is exposed to all kinds of culture, you know. I mean, if one becomes I'm sure that for every kid that became a Martian freak because he listened to my lyrics, there's another one that went through university and is a doctor. You know, it's all relative, you know. If I found myself in some kind of cul-de-sac in the music, I'd break down the problem by actually painting it. I'd try and visualize what the problem was, that the sense of these textures were grating against each other in a way that wasn't admirable. And I'd try and visualize those textures and paint them and then find out what was wrong. And then when I'd solve that problem, I'd take it back into the studio. I've never really compartmentalized things. Everything for me is just this flux of doing stuff. Some of it's music and some of it's visual. And the two have always been very entwined. It's going to affect me, whether I like it or not. I'm going to be pained by the people that don't like it, and I'm going to be bolstered by people who do like it. What it won't do is change the way that I work, which is probably the most important thing. But whatever I hear, and people will insist on sending me any criticism, I'll get over it fairly quickly. I'm not thick-skinned, but I'm not thin-skinned either. But I've gotten used to the fact that you just can't please all the people all the time. And I've got no great desire to be loved in a major way by faceless, anonymous crowds. It doesn't really, it's not part of something that I want. Well, I had a way of working through musical problems by painting them out at one time, and that seems to have disappeared over the years. But
you've lost that ability?
Yeah. For one reason or another, that seems to have changed now.
All right, let's take a look at some of them, and then we'll come back. These are the kinds of images that have been downloaded. These have been, in fact, downloaded by our group here from your website, www.boweart.com. Okay, let's take a look at the first thing. What's that? Could this be Iggy Pop, huh?
It certainly could be Iggy Pop. That's Iggy Pop in 1976, as I saw him, when we were living in Berlin. We just moved. We both had fairly severe drug problems. And so to rectify that, we moved to Berlin, the heroin capital of the world, which I guess in retrospect doesn't sound like a terribly sensible
No, it doesn't
thing.
sound very smart to me.
And that's a picture of Jim turning blue in his apartment in Berlin.
Tell me the satisfaction of completing a painting where you're on, that you like a lot.
For me,
the satisfaction of that.
For me, to be quite frank, it's finishing it so I can get on to something else. I mean,
it's getting
weird.
through it?
It's getting through it. It's the process. There's something in it that it just turns me to jelly. My heart and my mind just become, I can't explain it. It's a very strange feeling. It's not particularly pleasant either. I can't really say that I enjoy music or painting in quite that. I mean, it's not like sex or something which you can kind of really enjoy.
I knew you'd get back to sex.
It's important. But there's something volatile, emotive, and something that makes me really quite angry about going through the process of both making music and doing visual arts. And,
but visuals arts
but you know, I guess that's my problem.
No, but let's deal with your problem.
If you deal with my problem, I might not be able to do these things again, you see. I'm wary of analysis.
Yes, sir, but let me point out to you, knowing your history and knowing your family and knowing your background, you have always resisted any notion that this creativity that you have comes from any sort of dysfunctional or madness out of family.
I think I've often wondered if actually being an artist in any way, any nature, is a kind of a sign of a certain kind of dysfunction, a social dysfunctionalism anyway. It's an extraordinary thing to want to do. to express yourself in such rarefied terms. I think I think it's a loony kind of thing to want to do. I think the saner and rational approach to life is to survive steadfastly and create a protective home and create a warm, loving environment for one's family and get food for them. That's about it. That's actually all. Anything else is extra. All culture is extra. Culture is, you know, that's, I guess it's a freebie. It's something that we only need to eat. We don't need particular color plates or particular height chairs or anything. I mean, anything will do, but we insist on making 1,000 different kinds of chairs and 15 different kinds of plates. It's unnecessary, and it's a sign of the irrational part of man, I think. We should just be content with picking nuts. Not mine, I might add. Well, I suppose since I stopped doing drugs and drinking, I think probably I really prize getting up early in the morning, which is something that happens. I now find, for years now, I've gotten up regularly at 6 in the morning. It doesn't matter what time I go to bed, I still get up, which is not a great thing, actually, when I'm rehearsing, because you rehearse pretty late. But I still get up at 6. I enjoy the fact of seeing the light come up with me, and then utilizing the daylight and what it brings and the kind of message that it brings. It's a different message from when you're living in twilight hours, and things get very symbolic representationally. If you live through the twilight hours and the early hours of the morning, there's a shadow to your life all the time. Psychologically, you're in the dark as well as physically in the dark. And it's something that I find very uplifting and optimistic and creative about working and being very much in the daylight.
I saw you in that film, The Man Who Came to Earth, and that was a man who was in his own void, in a way.
Yes, very much.
Do you feel that yourself?
Thematically, I've always dealt with isolation in everything I've written, I think. So it's something that triggers me off. It always makes me interested in a new project if it has anything to do with alienation or isolation.
Do you feel isolated, though?
Not really, but I can quite imagine how it must feel to be isolated. So I have often put myself in circumstances and in positions where I am isolated, just so that I can write about it.
You know, in a way, I've sort of been thinking quite a lot about you, and often seen you anyway, right?
Is this smoke bothering you?
No, it's not at all. It's going to make you feel that mysterious that you are that you've talked about. I think that it's not at all mystifying why you change your appearance as often as you do, to my view, by the way, because I think you've used yourself as a canvas.
Yes, very much so.
Is that right?
Yes, very much so. I never wanted to appear as myself on stage, ever, at any time, until recently, I think. So as I did write in character form, I wanted to produce those characters on stage, which is something I feel I did quite successfully at the time.
That was simply an exercise of projecting something else. Like you say, for instance, you would be presenting a picture to
Well,
the
I wanted to use rock and roll in some way or other, and I got tired of the sort of the lie of the rock performer is exactly the same on stage as he is off stage, which in most cases isn't true at all. But so I thought, well, take it a stage further and completely separate the personalities, the person behind it all who's writing it and creating it, and the one up front that does the interviews and does the shows, and so I created the characters and put them on stage, and then I would take them further and put them into interviews, and I would only do interviews as the character. I think the difference that most artists have, the ones that I come across, we tend to think our opinions are a lot more important than other people's in some way. That often we feel as though we have the key to something. I don't think that we do at all. I just think we dwell on it more. We tend to look at the world as some usable substance more than a non-artist would. I think for many people, just getting through life is enough. That's a big enough task, let alone having to look at the world and the universe and say, now, if I had my way, you know,